In this video, we'll be talking about the rotary tool. We'll be answering a bunch of common questions surrounding the tool, and we'll go into detail about what it is, how to use it, and also how to be safe with it. So with that being said, and without further ado, let's get started. The first thing we want to do in our discussion about rotary tools is talk about what they are. A rotary tool, Dremel tool, or also called die grinder, is a handheld power tool that's used for cutting, grinding, polishing, and sanding. The rotary tool works by rotating an exchangeable bit at extremely high RPM, or rotations per minute. The high RPM allows an abrasive edge on the bit to move very fast and allows it to remove material. The rotary tool has a few important parts that we need to talk about in order to use it effectively. The first piece is the collet. The collet is this head assembly right here. The collet is a part of the rotary tool which holds on to our drill bit and stops it from moving while we're rotating. The collet works by applying force to metal grabbing arms within the collet, and it does this by allowing it to rotate on a screw inside of the collet. The movement of the metal grabbing arms will then apply force to your bit and allow it to stay in place. I want to show you what's inside the collet because that can get you a better idea how it works. So we'll go ahead and we'll unscrew the main head of the collet, and it reveals that there are metal arms in here that are separated by some space. When we put back on the collet head and rotate it down, we're pushing on those arms and pushing them closer to each other. Anything in the middle of them is going to have force applied to it. The second part that I'd like to talk about is the locking pin. The locking pin is a pin that allows and stops rotation of the motor shaft. The locking pin is what makes the rotation of the collet possible relative to the motor shaft, because otherwise we'd just be rotating the motor. When we hold down the button, we are able to unscrew and screw in the collet relative to the motor shaft. This is useful for changing bits, and we'll show you how to do that later in the video. Lastly, I want to talk about the speed dial. The speed dial is what allows the Dremel tool to have variable speed. On my model, I only have two different speeds, high and low. Others, it goes all the way from 0 to high and anything in between. The next thing we want to talk about is how to work with the rotary tool. Working with the rotary tool comes down to knowing the function and use of each of the types of bits. We'll get to that momentarily, but first I want to show you a very important skill that you need to know when you work with a rotary tool, and that is changing your bits. Changing a bit on a rotary tool is simple, but it depends on the type of bit that you're using. There are three types of bits which I will talk about. Every time that you change a bit, it involves using a collet and using a wrench. For a cutting bit, the cutting wheel is attached to the collet via a mandrel. The mandrel is a rod which has a screw tightened on one end. You take your cutting wheel, insert the screw into the cutting wheel center, and then tighten the screw down to the mandrel with a flathead screwdriver. After this is tight, you then loosen the collet to allow the bit to go in by holding down the locking pin and rotating the collet counterclockwise. After it is loosened, insert the mandrel into the collet, hold the locking pin down, and rotate the collet clockwise to tighten. A sanding bit is extremely simple to change. Just remove the sanding bit that you have worn out and place a new one on. Polishing bits use a mandrel which looks like a screw on one end. To replace a polishing bit, replace the polishing cotton and then put the bit into the rotary tool like you did before. Now that we know how to change bits, we can talk about the different types of bits that you can use for your rotary tool. Main categories of bits, according to Dremel, include the following: carving and engraving, sanding, cutting, grinding and sharpening, and cleaning and polishing. Carving and engraving bits are typically pointed bits with an abrasive coating. Their use, like other bits, is limited to certain materials. One type of engraving bit is a diamond bit. Diamond bits are useful for very hard material and can even engrave glass. Other carvers and engravers are ideal for plastic and wood. Sanding bits are another type of bit, and they are rather weak and you'll probably go through a lot of them. It's definitely best to stick with woods and plastics here because they really wear quickly. It's ineffective to use it on metals like steel. It won't be worth your time. Cutting discs come in disc form, and depending on whether the disc is reinforced or not, is going to let you know what types of materials you can use it on. The regular disc is okay for woods and plastics. I do want to warn you that it is dangerous to use regular bits though, as when you're off angle, they can very easily break, and because they're so brittle, they'll come off as shrapnel, and it can cause injury. I recommend the use of reinforced bits which have plexiglass reinforcement. These bits can even cut metal and have a pretty good chance of not breaking when you're using them in regular activity. Grinding and sharpening bits are ideal for hard materials. There are two different types. There's the orange type and then there's a green type. The orange types are made of a harder material and they're thus good for metals, and the other ones are really meant to use for something like plastic. The final type of bit, cleaning and polishing bits, are used with a polishing compound. These bits are ideal for polishing and cleaning wood or metal or plastic. So that covers working with bits, but I also wanted to share with you a few pieces of technique that you can use so that you can work more effectively and more safely. Tip number one is to always clamp your piece down when working with a rotary tool. Do not use your rotary tool if you're holding the piece of material that you're trying to grind or cut. The bit is incredibly dangerous and could hurt you. At high RPM, you never know where it's going to want to take itself. Additionally, holding your piece gives you significantly less control and you're likely to have a lower work product as a result of it. Tip number two is kind of my preference, but it's to use reinforced cutting bits as opposed to the regular bits. The regular bits you're going to go through so fast, it's not going to be worth it. Additionally, the lower quality bits have a tendency of breaking because they're so brittle. They're dangerous, they can damage property, and I think generally you should stay away from them. Tip number three is to always check your vents when you're working with your Dremel tool. The vents on the Dremel tool can get dust inside of them, and this dust is extremely damaging to Dremel tools and rotary tools. The dust can completely seize up the inner workings of the Dremel tool, and with how much fine dust it produces, this is a problem. So I think it's best to develop a habit of cleaning your Dremel tool as well as checking those vents. Lastly, tip number four is to cut, grind, or sand against the direction of rotation. If you're going with the rotation, the rotary tool will want to pick itself up and roll along the piece like a tire. Going against the direction of rotation, your Dremel tool will help you work. It'll push into the material as opposed to running away from it. And so, since we always want to end up safe, safety is the final part of our video. Safety is possible with the Dremel tool using the safety techniques that I talked about previously, and also using a bunch of different types of personal protective equipment, or PPE. Rotary tools have a nasty habit of creating very fine dust particles, and a lot of them. In addition, they can heat up to very high temperatures because they're moving at such high speeds and create such high friction. This can melt plastic. Use a dust mask when working with a rotary tool, and at the very least, you should have some basic level of ventilation so that you can vent those fumes and vent that dust. A good ventilation system has air coming into it and out of it. Leave a door open, open a window, and if you have some time and you want to invest in your health, set yourself up a dust collection system. These dust particles, as well as other debris from your material or even the rotary tool itself, can be a hazard to your eyes. So with that, you should use safety glasses. Also, because the rotary tool is so powerful and requires precision, it's a good suggestion to use gloves while you're working with a rotary tool. Well, with that, our discussion has come to its conclusion. I hope that you learned a lot from this video. If you have any other questions, comments, or concerns about rotary tools, please leave that in the comment section. As always, thanks for watching, and come back next time to learn about a new tool or material.